Yeah, you can just play us in, Warren. Just play us in.
Oh yeah.
It's so articulate too, man.
Oh,
Anyway,
you're very kind. Well,
man.
this isn't mine. This isn't mine. This is Balu who's sitting opposite me. It's his guitar. It is a 1962 Dot, obviously, 335, and it is absolutely gorgeous.
Good on him. Good
All
on
original. Yeah. I mean, I told him anything that walks in through the door becomes mine. So I mean, that's right, isn't it? Isn't that how it usually works?
Sometimes. Ladies and gentlemen,
Exactly.
welcome to another episode of At Home with Mark. This is season 3, episode 16. And I've been doing this show. This is by happenstance that this happened, Warren, that this came into my life. But I've been doing it since August 2020.
Nice.
And I have the distinct privilege of saying that I've had a bunch of my heroes on here, you being one of them.
Oh,
and,
you're too kind.
So, Warren, Huart, thank you so much for making time. And I know you're a busy dude, but I really appreciate you making some time for me today.
You're very welcome. Yes, I'm always in the middle of something. It's okay. We're always juggling 100 different things, but I personally wouldn't want it any other way.
Well,
I am going to drink some Pellegrino on camera. I'm not sponsored by them, but I do like my Pellegrino.
There you go. Take care of that thirst, my friend. So, Warren, I always start this show off because I'm very interested. Like, this is a guitar channel primarily. I mean, I've had a bunch of my favorite drummers on here and
That's
keyboard
all
players.
I really am as a guitar player. I mean, I started with guitar player and I got into production, on the back end, but I'm a guitar player. That's what I do.
And you do it extremely well. But I wanted to ask you, so for me, I have a very specific moment in the early 90s when I heard 10 and Nevermind and like playing NBA jams in my friend's bedroom that I went home and told my dad I wanted to play guitar. So do you have a really specific moment in your life too that's like that?
Well, it's an interesting one because yes and no. Because the reason why I play music is because of Queen and because I was a super young kid. I was 7 years old. And for Christmas, my father bought me a night at the opera. Excuse me. And in my house, it was only classical music and jazz and some blues, but it was predominantly classical. My dad was a painter and a sculptor. He was an artist. And he was admittedly kind of a snob in many ways. Like it had to be really, really good in order for us to have anything about it. It's interesting because, I grew up with a very traditional English, British kind of strict father in many ways. I didn't watch kids programs. He thought they were stupid. We used to watch documentaries and stuff. He would let us watch things like Chaplin and Laurel and Hardy and stuff like that. He seemed to really like that kind of humor. So we'd watch these old reruns, stuff like that. But essentially, growing up with classical music was incredible. Huge melodies, growing up, those of your viewers that are British will know the things I'm going to say, growing up on Elgar and, Vaughan Williams, all of that beautiful music. When Queen came into my life, he gave me this album for Christmas and said, "This is worthy." Like handed it to me. So it was like, you're allowed to listen to this. So there I am. I'm 7 years old, which is far too young to hit a kid with some crazy, Prophet Song and Bohemian Rhapsody kind of music. But because I grew up in this very intense kind of Mussorgsky, Katachuria and Tchaikovsky, Beethoven, Mozart, Haydn, Handel, all of that was being played nonstop in my life. This just seemed to melt into it. However, the reason why I say yes and no to your answer is that is the reason why I do music. It's also the reason why I play the guitar. But I didn't pick up the guitar till I was 15.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Which is why I think, which is actually the reason why I think I'm a good guitar player and I'm a good producer. The reason why I think I'm a good producer, starting with that first, is because I had 15 years of not obsessing about learning the instrument, just listening to music. By 15, my record collection was 300 or 400 albums. I had everything Miles Davis, everything Jimi Hendrix, everything Beatles, you name it. Lots of Coltrane, not everything Coltrane, but lots of Coltrane. So I had this real big balance of like all of the great artists, big prog head. So I had Crimson and Genesis and, and then not so well-known bands. Maybe your viewers will know, but National Health, Gilgamesh, trying to think of other bands I love that. Oh, Caravan, Camel, all the C's. Tons of that stuff. All the Canterbury bands, loved all of that stuff. In the Land of Grey and Pink is still one of my favorite albums to this day, and it's an absolutely silly album in all the right ways. So the guitar came. Like I always wanted to be the guitar player. I always wanted to be Brian May. I always wanted to be Andy Latimer. I always wanted to be Jimi Hendrix. I always wanted to be one of the great blues players. I saw Albert King when I was 13. I went to great blues shows. Just a couple of days ago, I posted a photo of some tickets from the early 80s. And it's like Buddy Guy, Albert King. I went to all of those shows. B.B. King I saw multiple times.
Man. So
all of this, I was very lucky. And I got in super early. I was still like 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 years old going to these shows. And so by the time I got to the guitar, I was already a huge fan of so much great music. And I grew up in a time of like very late 70s as a little kid through the 80s when production was just so awesome.
Yeah.
When Hugh Padgham and Steve Lillywhite were like pushing the boundaries and making like albums like XTC, English Settlement, and Black Sea, and just like these incredible sounding records. Peter Gabriel, Melt. I mean, what a great record. And then maybe it's a pop album, but still incredible. So I grew up, Hounds of Love, Kate Bush, all these masterpieces of production. Pretty lucky, pretty darn lucky. And all great songwriters. And then of course, hearing Van Halen for the first time and just being like, I remember hearing Eruption and being like, what is that? How do people...
Me too.
How do you make those sounds,
Yep, totally. So if you're 15, so at that time, I guess, do you feel like you had more mature ears? So when you got to that instrument, it just felt like it came a little bit more naturally because you were like seeing all these amazing shows and like, how did that happen?
Great question. Actually, the weirdest thing was I wasn't naturally gifted at all. I had a good ear and I knew what I wanted, but I wasn't one of those guys that picked up the guitar. And I had friends, John Hill, if you're watching, that just had that ear. John would just like, one of my best friends would just hear a record and then start playing back the parts. And I didn't have that, even though I had the music come in. So that actually took some work, which is why I'm very, very adamant. Hopefully it's something that comes across in all the videos I do, that all these things can be learned with work and passion. That combination of being passionate and working hard, you put those two things together, you can achieve anything. I'm not a big natural talent kind of guy. I'm not saying there aren't people that seem to get it quicker, like my friend John. But at the end of the day, the people that seem to really excel are the people that add that hard work in there with that passion. And I've seen the reverse. I've seen people that it came really easily to just give up and never achieve. And yet they were seen to be light years ahead of everybody else. So there's lots to the formula. I know it's easy for people who don't want to work hard at their given craft to say, it's all natural born talent. Well, I had zero natural born talent. I just had a love of music and a father that was very encouraging in anything that was to do with the arts. Even though we were super poor, and we were very, very poor, my father being a painter and a sculptor, I always joke it's like having a dad who's a bass player. Someday, we didn't feel poor. Don't get me wrong. It wasn't like, but my point is we didn't have any luxuries. And then the first guitar that I had, I wanted to be Brian May. So my dad and I built it. And obviously my dad built it and I watched him and sanded some stuff. He essentially built it. Like Brian says, it was really his father, but we built it, quote unquote, together. I helped him. I did things with him, but he was obviously driving the ship on that one. And it was an incredible experience. And Well,
what was that instrument? So what did you guys build? Did you build like a
we
Brian
built
May,
a
replica?
Stratopole. So what we did is we made a Strat neck, and we so my dad was working for this company called IPC. He would do illustrations for magazines and stuff. He'd do paintings. and that was how he was, making ends meet. So he would commute to London and go and work, or either work in their office or work from home and take it up to the office. We're talking about pre JPEGs. You weren't taking photos and sending them. You had to take in the artwork and stuff. Although he was obviously a very skillful photographer as well. But so he went up to London one day, and he's in IPC's office. I think the office he was in was actually in Savile Row. It's a whole other conversation. Any Beatles fanatics will know why Savile Row is important. It's opposite the Apple building. So he worked in a building opposite the Apple building. And so one day he is leaving the office, and he's walking, to the nearest tube. And there is was a Chinese, it was still there, but there was a Chinese restaurant within a block or two of the office. And he I think he said he just cut through like an alley or a little road or whatever. And there was a huge rubbish bin, trash can, sitting out the back. And in there was a chopping board. I'm not joking. That's crazy. Huge chopping board. And this chopping board was like covered had blood stains on it and everything. And it was from the restaurant. Yeah. And obviously they had just, I don't know, they got a new chopping board. I don't know what happened, but they got rid of it. And so he brings this home, this huge piece of like really, really dense mahogany, like really dense, like weighed so much. And he's like, well, what shape do you want your guitar to be? And he cut it out of that. It was a lot of work to cut it. And he cut out a Les Paul shape, then spent goodness knows how long shaping the top so it had a curved top, like weeks, trying to shape it properly, chiseling it and sanding it, chiseling it and sanding it.
I can't even imagine.
Put on the Fender neck that he had made, with the truss rod, and then we did buy the hardware. We didn't do what Brian's dad would. Brian's dad, what was it? It's a confusion. People say it was a kickstand for a motorcycle. I don't think it was, but anyway, it's like motorcycle parts and things like that. Yeah. Which is funny because Brian's body's made out of a mantelpiece, a piece of wood from a mantelpiece. So it's always like these. Neither of us, nobody went to a wood store and bought a piece of wood. It was all just found, which also for anybody who's watching, who's got parents or grandparents that are post-war. My dad was born in 1939, so he's not a boomer. He's born pre-war. But anybody that grew up in that era of rationing, that's the way all of those people thought. Mm-hmm. They didn't go, I'm going to buy something. They're like, what can I make? Because no matter whether you were rich or poor in Britain, everything was rationed. You had a certain amount of food, you had a certain amount of this and the other. So their mentality, that age group, was just like, how can I make this, how can I make this happen? And that's what he did. So he, like I said, I quote unquote helped, but he essentially built this guitar. But yes, like I said, we did cheat. We bought a shallow bridge, which was actually quite expensive for us, but we really thought, let's put a really nice bridge on it. We bought shallow machine heads, shallow tuning pegs. He obviously made the bone nut. And then we ended up making some pickups and eventually actually bought some DiMarzio VS1s, Vintage Series Strat pickups that we put in it. So Les Paul body, Strat neck, Strat pickups, shallow parts.
Man, is it still around somewhere?
Yes, the last word, somewhere.
Oh man,
I don't want to get into that conversation. It is not in my possession currently.
Okay.
That's a whole other long conversation.
Yeah. So if that was your first real electric guitar, then?
Yep.
So what were you playing? What was your first rig? Like what amp were you playing through? Like what were you doing?
The worst amp ever, a FAL. It was called a Futuristic AIDS Limited, I think it was called. FAL.
Okay.
And it was a bass amp. It was like a bass amp, but it was a 40-watt bass amp, and it had a volume treble bass. I don't think it was a 15-inch speaker. It may have been a 12, but it was this sort of rectangular, like not. It was like a portrait size amp, so it just kind of went up. Yeah. Treble bass and a volume, no saturation. It was completely and utterly transistor and totally clean and then you turned it up. Of course, the speaker was old and awful, so the speaker would start farting out when you turned it up. And then my first distortion pedal was a Colesborough Suzz.
I am not familiar with that.
Which I wish I kept, because even though it was dreadful compared with the DS1 and the ODR ones and stuff, the overdrive ones, the Boss pedals you could buy, it was about half the price, and it was made in England. Now, of course, I go online and they're hundreds of dollars because they're now collectible and rare. But at the time, it was like, it just meant you were poor and you couldn't buy real gear.
Well, how crazy is it now? I mean, like, think about, because I'm 42, so I started playing guitar in like 7th grade. So
42. Does that mean you're with me? Are you a Gen Xer or are you cusp millennial? What are you?
I don't even know what I am in that terms of like the generations. My wife and I talk about that all the time because my sister is like definitely Gen X, but
She's
but
older than
anyway,
you.
yeah, she's older than me. But like, it's weird because think about like when we started playing guitar. Like my first guitar pedal was a Super Chorus pedal. I knew no better. I just wanted to be Kurt Cobain, and now today it's
I
like think
used the
about
DS1.
yeah. But like all of the different companies and boutique pedal makers and that are doing it these days, there's so much good stuff. I always talk about how it's like the platinum era of gear because
Oh
we
no,
have
we're
so
spoiled for
many.
equipment now.
Oh my god, dude! Like so much stuff. I mean, every day there's somebody coming out with a new fuzz pedal or a new overdrive pedal, whatever it may be.
I don't think so.
But
It's okay.
so cool. Like, I mean, that to build something with your dad like that and to get into music and start playing, I mean, that's pretty special, man. That's an awesome story. So when did Star 69 come into play? Like, when did
Oh
when
wow.
did that all happen?
That was 94.
Okay.
So in 94, I was the guitar player you just heard at the beginning. So I was like shreddy guitar player, jazz, funky guitar player, I was into Holdsworth and Brian May and Jeff Beck and Fripp and you name it. I mean, I was into guitar players. So I learned all those kinds of different things. I had pedals, I had amps, I had different guitars. I had a 335 block. I think it was a 72 at the time. So I was into all of that stuff. But in 94, being able to play like that was of no use whatsoever. Nobody was interested in that whatsoever. So one of my school friends who I grew up with, I've known since I was 3 or 4 years old, is Patrick Hannum, and he's the drummer for the Sundays, who were a successful band at the time. And he said, "Oh, I've got this new band with this American girl singer, and we need a bass player. You want to play bass?" So I called our mutual friend, Jute Butcher, and Julian Butcher, we call him Jute. It's a whole long story, English nicknames. And so Jute had a huge collection of guitars and basses and stuff. And he had an RD Artist bass that used to belong to Phil Lynott. So it was a black bass with the mirror scratch plate, because Phil used to put like mirror scratch plates on all of his basses. And he had this RD Artist. I think there's a photo of him playing it, or two. And he had somehow got this bass, and so he lent it to me. And so that was the bass I used with Star 69, which is pretty cool. It weighs a ton, but it's big black RD Artist mirror scratch plate. Pretty awesome. And then I would just beg, borrow, or steal bass amps from whoever. And when we would do shows, I would just hope that the other band had a spare bass amp I could use. We figured it out. But so it was sort of, necessity is the mother of invention. I became a bass player because nobody wanted shredding guitar players in 94.
Right.
And it wasn't cool to sweep pick in 94. You know what I mean?
How did you get into doing that stuff at that time, since it wasn't really readily in the mainstream and everything? Like,
well, it was if you were
like Frank Gambale, like that
yeah,
fusion stuff.
I used to learn that stuff as well. I had a think we're talking guitar. Can you plug this in, Eric? I love that we're talking guitars.
Oh yeah,
because all I usually talk about is recording.
I thought this would be a fun time to do this because I know you probably don't get a chance to do it. I just got this baby a couple months ago. I sold several guitars to finally get a custom shop. It's been like a bucket list item. When you turn 40 and you start getting over that hill, I was like, all right, that's it. Enough is enough. I'm gonna get one. But
I had a similar experience. I had a 1962 Guild Starfire, and I had to sell it to pay bills when I was like in my early 20s, and I found one at that store. I think it's in New Jersey called Retro Fret. You know that company?
I've heard of it actually.
Really good. They have a really good Instagram account. Go check them out.
Okay.
And they had a mint one, same year, 62. And I'm looking at it going, I want that. And I'm denied about it because I'm just weird about buying things for myself, rather than my family. Like my wife always has a nicer car.
Yeah, that's okay though. I mean, it all evens out.
I've got a nice car there. But
There you go.
for years, she'd always have a nice car. But anyway, cut a long story short, I am Denard about it. But so I'm this. I totally understand what you're saying about with the Strat. I just had to get it because I'd sold this guitar through no fault of my own. I had to make ends meet on something,
Mm-hmm.
and I had been looking for years, and there it was. It wasn't
That's so
really
cool.
expensive, but it wasn't really cheap. So I'm Denard about it. Turned out, but yeah. So I mean, like for me, it was like so there was this guy called Ollie Alcock, who still is alive in Carlisle. From anybody that knows Carlisle in the north of England. So I was 16, 17. I left home at 16. I did a year at art school, and then I moved to the north of England and joined a club band. Now we were a band that we obviously did originals as well, did original material. But to make money and survive, you would play in clubs.
Mm-hmm.
And in the north of England, that was a much bigger scene than it was in the south, because there was more working men's clubs, bars, pubs, etc., that would do that. And so I moved up there, and like I said, I wasn't initially a great guitar player. I played a lot, but I didn't play with any focus. So solos were like, that kind of, all those kind of things that you do when you first start playing guitar.
Yeah.
So I'm like a year or two into playing, but that's really all I'm doing. I'm playing, all the things that, the basic blues rock stuff. But I met this guy through the band I was in. I met this guy called Ollie Alcock, and Ollie was in a band called England in the 70s, who was signed to Jet Records. He'd played the Isle of Wight. You can look it up. The band was called England, and his bass player and other lead singer in the band was John Waite, who went on and wrote, of course, Missing You, became a huge star in the US in the 80s. And he also had a band called Universe as well. And they were all like these bands that were like really big, but never got big, like touring, big clubs. I think he put out one record on Universe and one record when it was called England, but never quite got the acclaim that they wanted or needed or should have. And the thing about him is I learned stuff from him, but the biggest thing I learned from him was just a mindset. Like he taught me patterns, like, playing in 4, playing in 3, 2s, reverse, then. So he taught me all these patterns and all these kinds of ideas, which I hadn't been doing. I've been playing a riff like, just going up and down scales and stuff like that. And I didn't have anybody to sort of break me out of these habits. And then he taught me to leave space. And he started, and I was like, oh, wait there, but the most important thing was not just that, was the fact that he's like, okay, here's what you need to know. You need to listen to Paul Kossoff for vibrato. You need to get that.
Yeah.
And it needs to come from the fulcrum. It needs to be like this. He goes, I don't want to see you using your fingers to bend a string. You have to use your wrist.
Yeah.
So it's all from the wrist, like this. That was the Kossoff. Then he goes, now I want you to listen to Alan Holdsworth, and I want you to practice. All that stuff is all Holdsworth.
Yeah.
It's all on the left hand. So he goes, I want you to listen to Holdsworth. And it was all like that. And then it was like right hand technique, out of Miolo. Go and listen to Land of the Midnight Star.
Yeah.
And it's all in the right hand. And so he was just like this guy who was able to focus me and go, this is the guitar player you need to listen for that technique. This is the guitar player you need to listen for that technique. This is the guitar player. And then he goes, go and listen to Keith Richards and John Lennon for right hand rhythm. And then, of course, Nile Rodgers, for the whole, the whole,
Yeah, man.
Yeah. All of that stuff. And that was that was the biggest lesson I could learn, was not necessarily, yes, he was teaching me things, but was more bigger than that. I often talk about mentors, and mentors, they may be telling you things, so you're learning, but mentors are more like an osmosis thing. You pick up things from them. I learned many, many years ago that phrase, like, surround yourself with people that have the thing that you want. You know what I mean? And sometimes it's the music, but sometimes it's the fact that they know how to be musicians or engineers or whatever it might be, but also are like good people, like, you know what I mean? I tend to gravitate personally, and this is no disrespect to single people, but I do like working with people like married with kids. And those are the most successful people I get to work with because I feel like they have the same goals, you know? And so I like, you know, so when people like that you respect, that seem to have a depth,
Yeah.
you're like, oh, and they say, hey, you should listen to this person. You're like, okay, I want that. I want what you have.
I 100% know what you're talking about because the two dudes that are in my band, that's what I looked for. So people that are like family minded, have goals with music, have like a drive with
Yeah.
music, want to learn their instrument, want to get better on their instrument. Because there is a level of dedication that you know, my guitar teacher when I was young was like, listen, I'm going to tell you, you're becoming a musician, you're taking a vow of poverty. Just putting that out there, right? Like, what, dude? That's not the thing you
Alu
say to
can't
a
hear us.
kid.
You said you're becoming a musician. You take a vow of poverty.
But you know, it's like it's a joke, but it's true. Like you get into this stuff, and like I think that's what COVID has brought back for me is to realize why did I get into this in the first place? You know, like when you
Well,
get
that's what I
in,
think.
you know,
That's I totally understand. That's why, you know, I talk about being 7 when I discovered music and it changed my whole perception. Was I'm really glad because most of the dudes that I kind of grew up with, they got into music about 13, 14, 15 because they wanted girls. They did. They just wanted to be
yeah,
in a
I hear
band
you.
and be a guitar hero. I
Yeah.
was already obsessed with music and had like Queen sprayed on my wall. I'd made a stencil of the Queen logo and I bought some gold paint and I sprayed Queen like all over my wall at like
Oh my god,
9,
man, that's
you
cool.
know, and it's, yeah. So I was in love with music before girls or any of that stuff. And I think I've been asked this question, you know, this kind of idea of a question before. And I always respond with like, you know, I'm blessed because I fell in love with music too early. You know,
Hmm.
being in love with it before puberty is actually a really, really good thing because you're only motivational. You know, just to be blunt, it's not about sex, drugs, and It's just about the rock and roll.
100%, man.
Yeah,
100%. I feel like that's why when I was in my buddy's room playing whatever we were playing, Sega Genesis, and I heard he put on Nevermind first, but I will tell you, and my followers know I'm a huge Pearl Jam nut. Like
right.
I've been with those guys since day one, and I will be with them until the day I die. And there's something about those records, and I think, and we can get into this because I know that, you know, I've been watching your channel forever. I've been a subscriber forever. I've seen, you know, people like Michael come on and talk about Black Hole Sun and watching that enthralled, just like, oh my God, I can't believe we're hearing all this stuff. And it's just like those records, there's something special about that period of time. And for me, the way that Pearl Jam stood out to me is it was different in the sense of like the songwriting. And I'm a
Sure.
songwriter too. So I went to college and I went to music school for songwriting and guitar. But like, but that
I'll
record
keep looking for you.
and all the records post 10,
Yep.
whatever, to
Yep.
me, it was about the songs. Like the song was like the thing that really sucked me in and still sucks me in about Pearl Jam.
Yep.
So like, if we get in, and I want to get into Jellyfish too, man, because Jellyfish saved my life one summer. Like,
It's interesting. You know, you're the third podcast I've done in the last 2 or 3 weeks, which has been about jellyfish.
I mean, there's no reason anyone shouldn't be talking about Jellyfish.
No, I'm
It's like,
absolutely massive fan, and I'm so glad to feel like I'm helped be part of a whole kind of bringing up the conversation.
oh my God, yeah.
One of the things I pride myself on, without making it about me for a second, but I'll just be honest. One of the things that I pride myself on our YouTube channel, I do what I think is best. I don't. I know, for instance, that, you know, today we put up a video on you know, Sister Rosetta Tharpe, and I know it's going to get like 10,000 views over a year. That's fine. I did Charlie Christian last week. It's about 11,000 views. I don't care. I could do Dave Gilmour Comfortably Numb solo breakdown and do that, and it will get 500,000 views.
Mm-hmm.
We know this. I could do Queen. I could do Led Zeppelin. I could do all of these things. All of these are bands I absolutely love. But for me, to ignore where the music comes from just for the sake of views and being popularist, which is also something I absolutely hate, populism kind of culture. To me, that you know, I'm going to run where the money is just not what I'm about. And so,
Amen.
yeah, Yeah, but there's very few of us that think that way because everybody's chasing the dollar, you know.
Mhm.
And I get it; we all have to make a living, but I think there's a nice middle ground. So for me, Jellyfish was a big deal to feature and talk about. Obviously, I knew Roger already, and we'd worked together on I can't remember what project we did together now. Anyway, I'm blanking, but Jellyfish are one of those bands, and I know you probably wanted to talk about other bands before, and I've leaped ahead, but
That's okay.
when I went to go and see Jellyfish on the second album, I didn't see them on the first album. I bought the first album, but when I went to go and see them on the second album, I went to Clapham Grand, and friends of mine were opening for them. It was actually Guy Chambers' band, which were called why am I blanking? Lemon Trees, called the Lemon Trees. So the Lemon Trees opened for them. A great band, Stacey Brothers. Anybody who knows the Stacey Brothers, fantastic musicians.
Mm-hmm.
And Guy, of course, is an incredible songwriter. Wrote, I don't know, 50 top 10 singles. You know, he wrote Angel, you know, which has been covered by everybody. The guy Robbie from Take That had a massive hit with. Anyway, cut a long story short, they were phenomenal. They opened up, we were all blown away, and then Jellyfish comes on, and it was just wow, it's incredible.
Yeah,
and they're like you hear 10cc, you hear Supertramp, you hear the Beach Boys, you hear the Beatles, you hear a little bit of new wave, you hear a little bit of Elvis Costello mixed in there as well. But the point is like you hear all those things without going, oh, they stole this riff, they stole this idea. It just feels like they're cut from the same cloth that you love.
mm-hmm.
And they were just starting to get big in the UK, and then when they broke up, they had Bed Spring Kiss was like a top 40 hit. I can't remember what single it was. It might have been Fan Club or something. It was top 20 or top 30. They were like becoming a band that made sense because their big melodies obviously work really well in the UK. We love our big melodies. And of course they broke up. But I don't think it's a surprise that within a year, Britpop is huge because they made all of us go back and listen to all of those great bands from the 60s and the 70s that we loved. You know,
That's so
I think
interesting.
so, you know, it's what happens. You know, you sort of stir the pot a bit, and all that flavor comes out, and people pick up on it and play their music. So Jellyfish are instrumental in that, even though nobody will name check it. The fact that everybody started going back and listening to the 60s and the 70s again because of them was huge. And I'll tell you, all the musicians I knew, we all loved Jellyfish. And then we all fell in love with Modern Life is Rubbish when Blur made that record because it sounded like a 60s/70s record with the Kinks like kind of mixed in. And suddenly it was about pedals and guitar parts again, like writing really good parts, using pedals and amps and, you know, weird guitars and stuff that was just like, wow, you know, that it was a great time to be into music, and Jellyfish were a huge catalyst for it.
It feels like a fraternity. Like Jellyfish feels like a fraternity for like musicians. You know what I mean? Like there's this thing about it. There's this mystique and this ethos. Like I came across him because one of my really good friends, I was going through a terrible breakup with this girl. He's like, I'm picking you up. We're going out. Came, picked me up and put on Spilt Milk. And like, we didn't even go to the bars. Can we just drive? I want to listen to the record again. So we just drove around. And then he put on Owsley's first record. Are you hip to that record? Oh my gosh. And then, so I was just like, oh my gosh. And I got to get every single power pop album I could ever get my hands on, because it was just like expanding my palette in terms of understanding what is possible with music and like what is possible with songwriting. So that was a huge deal for me. But to go backwards,
sure.
So Pearl Jam, it's funny.
I should have guessed you're wearing a plaid shirt. I should have known that Pearl Jam was going to come up with the plaid shirt.
Well,
where's mine, Erica? Well,
Brendan,
I have one in the house.
I mean, I feel like after that, I followed like Brendan O'Brien's career for a long time. You know, it's like, how could you not? But I feel like at that moment for Pearl Jam to enter my life, like I think that's what I was looking for, was because there was elements of Stevie and Jimmy and like all this stuff that I wasn't exposed to yet as a 10-year-old, 11-year-old. I didn't really know.
So much Zeppelin.
You know?
So much Zeppelin.
Yeah.
Ridiculous. Eric, would you mind answering this? It's Louise.
But like, so for that band in particular, I feel like the whole Seattle scene in particular, I have loved seeing like stuff that you've been breaking down and people that you've been come into the studio and break the track down, especially Super Unknown. We could talk about that, because in my opinion, I think that might be one of the greatest sonic record, like how the song was captured and how the instrumentation was captured and like how it was
No,
recorded.
Michael is obsessive with sound.
Yeah.
Obsessive. I remember in his sort of heyday in the late 90s through early 2000s, when I first got started in production in Los Angeles in the very late 90s, early 2000s, we were afraid of him. We were afraid of him. And it was all like, you knew that when he made a record, it was going to sound unbelievable. It's going to be one of the best sounding records. The songs were going to be incredible. One of his biggest skills is obviously getting performances out of people. His attention to detail is stupid. And probably it's the weirdest thing is like, I wish he was here because I would like to ask him this question, which I don't know if I did. He doesn't make many records with people. He makes their best album and then maybe does one other. I think the reality is like he pushes his artists so hard. I mean, he's an artist himself because, of course, he got his start by working with Herbie Hancock on Future Shock and did Rocket, him and Bill Laswell. I mean, which is definitely one of the best albums of all time, but more importantly, one of the most influential and important albums of all time. Just completely changed the music industry overnight. You got this jazz legend doing this kind of urban, electronic, early hip hop kind of, the scratching on it, all of this stuff, which we take for granted now. Herbie Hancock brought it into the mainstream, a jazz piano player, arguably one of the greatest jazz piano players ever, doing such an incredible record. And Michael and Bill Laswell were there doing it with him, and my friend Dave Jordan. So, Michael, I can imagine, I never made a record with him. I can imagine as a taskmaster, he's ridiculous because he's probably going to be in Chris's ear going, "Why? Haven't you told me stories? They're all in the video." Like, well, why are you writing this song? He doesn't just want the song to sound good and be good. He wants to know that the lyric means something.
Yeah.
So when he works on a record, it's undeniable at every level, every single level.
I loved that story about Chris cutting his vocals by himself. Like that he just did it. He taught him what he needed to do to track the stuff and just like go in there by yourself if you're more comfortable and sing your ass off.
Yeah.
That was amazing.
I think that I imagine, and I think Michael would be happy to say this, I imagine making those records, there was probably tons of tension because he's pushing people so hard. I imagine it was just like, doesn't told me this at all, but I imagine he was probably like, you know what, go in there and do it yourself. Then if you know what you want, go and do it yourself. I imagine it was like, yeah, I'm going to go and do that. I don't think it was sitting down like at a boardroom meeting going, you know what, Chris Cornell, I think you're a lovely singer. And I think it would be a really good idea for you to do it on your own. I'm sure it like came out of like passion and trying hard and whatever. And he went with the solution. And maybe it came out of an explosive situation. I don't know. My point is like his results speak for themselves.
Yeah.
Every record he's done just sounds amazing. And it's head and shoulders above all the rest of the guys and girls of the 90s. I mean, yeah, you're right. That Soundgarden album is unbelievable.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
So did you take anything from that playbook? How do you work as a producer then? So if you're working with the band, which you've done a lot of, how do you do that?
Well, I mean, there's Michael on there, but then I've also done a lot of records with Jack Douglas. Of course, did Toys, Aerosmith Toys, Aerosmith Rocks. He did John Lennon Double Fantasy, Milk and Honey. He was one of the engineers on Imagine, and 100 other things he's done. He worked with Dylan and The Who and Supertramp, produced Supertramp album. I mean, his accomplishments are vast and made some of the biggest and best. I mean, Toys and Rocks, I think, are in the two, both of them are in the top 10 biggest selling rock albums of all time. So, so he's no slouch. Jack is a completely different producer. He's all about the creativity. He's all about, which is interesting, but no. Michael's all about the creativity. Jack's all about the creativity. But Jack's way of going there is to just let people explore the studio space, as it were. He just lets everybody, and then he reins them in. I think Michael probably does the same thing to a certain extent. But Jack's sessions are light. They're humorous. If it's a tense situation, he dissipates it. Everybody in the room that's actually on the production side has an opinion, has a voice. He doesn't play off singers. And I don't think Michael would do any of this stuff as well. Michael's probably very similar. They're both New Yorkers. Interesting how two of the best producers, American producers ever live, are both New Yorkers. And I think that Phil Ramone, another incredible producer, New Yorker, Shelley Yakus, James Singer, all those guys are all New Yorkers. Clear Mountain. The list is ridiculous of all these guys that started on the East Coast in those studios, and some of them moved over here, some stayed there. But there's probably a bit of a matter of factness, but also some lightness. And what Jack taught me was, don't play favorites. Don't go and say, this guy wrote the song, so he's the only person you listen to. This guy's the singer, he's the only person you listen to. He doesn't do that at all. I'm in a room with Joe Perry, Brad Whitford, Steven Tyler, Jesse Kramer. Sorry, Jesse's his son. Sorry, Joey Kramer and Jesse, and all these different people. And he does not make Tom, who's the bass player, feel unimportant because Joe and Steven wrote the song. Tom's opinion on the song is just as important as everybody else's. He keeps it so it's a band, which is why you get Toys and you get Rocks, because it sounds like a band playing, because that's what it was. So that's what I learned with Jack. I think Michael, I wish he was here to reaffirm this, but I think Michael's thing is that he gets the best results at all costs. Yeah. Jack will probably just keep going around and around until it gets to be the place where he wants it to be. Michael does indulge, I'm sure he does, for creativity, but he is a get there at all costs. And if it meant, like you said, Chris is doing the vocals on his own, so he feels comfortable and doesn't feel judged or whatever it was. I'm inventing ideas. I don't know why. If that's what gets the results, then that's what you do.
Man, yeah. Well, that's killer. I wanted to show you something. So I found out about Baxendale from you.
Love Scott Baxendale's guitars.
And my grandfather had this guitar, this Harmony Vogue.
Nice.
From 1930. So I talked to Scott. I'm gonna send this to him to fix.
Send it to Scott. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's in 1939.
Beautiful.
So like when you had that done, what were your expectations? And then when you got it, like how far? I know on your face in that video when you were talking about it, I could see how giddy you were.
It's unbelievable. I mean, It takes. I've only got one here at the moment. It's in the other room. I gave the other one to my friend Louise, who just called, and she's been using it to write on, because she picked it up and was like, found it inspiring. So I was like, take it away. I've got two of them. Take it away and go and write on it. And she's written lots of songs on it. The thing is about the Baxendale guitars, and as you can point, that guitar you've got there, that 1939 Harmony, has the same wood as a Martin or a Gibson.
Right.
So it's made with the best quality woods in the world. The problem is the struts in it are like 1/2-inch pieces. They were like really expensive guitars in as much as the wood is expensive, but the way they put them together was in the cheapest possible way. So what Scott does is he takes them completely apart and restruts them like a Martin, and suddenly they come to life, because that's like a $40 pawn shop guitar with a solid top, solid rosewood top. That piece of wood is probably worth like $400 on its own now. Right. All this like Brazilian rosewood and African mahoganies and all these incredibly expensive woods, but they were built in factories. Kay, Harmony, Silvertone, all built in the same factories. And when they put them together, they just used big fat struts and didn't really think about it.
So when you first strummed that guitar, when you got it back, were you like, what?
Yeah, I thought somebody had sent me back a Martin. I'd sent a $40 guitar and got a $5,000 guitar back. He's a genius. He's also the nicest guy on the planet.
Yeah,
so easy to work with.
I
was just I had lunch with my friend Baloo over there, and as I was talking about, that's one of the biggest things. You like a product, then you love a product when you find the person that built it is actually somebody that you can relate to.
Oh man, 100%. It's the same thing like you said with working with musicians and people that are like mind. I wanted to ask you, so from working, like the difference between working with commercial music and working with film music, do you approach those projects differently? I've done a little bit of like songwriting for film and TV and stuff in the past few years, and it's definitely a different beast in terms of what people are looking for. But like, I was curious about someone like you. How do you approach working on those projects differently between working with a band and working with a producer on a movie or whatever it may be?
Well, over the years, my biggest successes, and this is the when it comes to film and TV, have been well, obviously I got to work on some massive songs that got all over the place, like How to Save a Life, of course. I don't know if it still is, but at one stage it was like the most licensed song or something. You remember there was a period in the mid 2000s, you turn on the radio and hear this How to Save a Life nonstop. Then you go and watch a movie or a TV show and it'd be like, How to Save a Life. You'd be like, really? In another show? I remember there was a scene in Scrubs with Zach Braff is our neighbor up here. Zach Braff goes, you know what? It's a time like this when it reminds me of that Frey song. And then I never knew comes on and he goes, no, not that one, the other one. And then it goes, How to Save a Life. That's the one, yeah. It's like a huge joke in the TV show, but it was like we were having when we were at Greenblatt's, which just closed down, so sad. We were at Greenblatt's, you remember, and there was like these like 30-year-olds, 25, 30-year-old kids on a table, kids, you know what I mean? They're in 25, 30-year-olds on a table opposite us. And they were going, hey, doesn't it remind you we're at college whenever you hear How to Save a Life? I started to kind of giggle because, like, for them, it's 8 to 10 years before when we did it. And of course, it was probably ubiquitous, and so there's that, obviously, some of the biggest successful stuff I've worked on, a lot of those big movie credits are because I've recorded songs that have been in huge movies. But what you're talking about specifically, the biggest successes I've had with music written for film and TV, and this is going to really probably upset the apple cart, are when I've tried the least. I did a lot of stuff for Disney, and the stuff that they always chose was the stuff that I didn't put that much time and effort into and kept raw. And then I remember doing, I'm not going to say what it was because it's a bit of a sore subject, but I spent weeks and weeks on a TV show that I got rejected on because another composer, I'll tell you off camera who it was because you'll laugh when I tell you, trust me, had got fired off of a gig. And so they wanted to employ him. So they gave him the thing. And that was just frustrating. But then the success I had was there was something that I had literally spent 15 or 20 minutes doing. So it's a really one. When you ask for advice in that, I think the best advice is to have perspective, have the ability to be able to stand back and listen and not get so caught up in the minutia that you're sitting there like overanalyzing, retracking, redoing this, redoing all of these things so many thousands of times that you send it off to somebody and they absolutely hate it because it sounds really, overthought and overwrought.
It's interesting to me about like writing for film and TV because I just did something this past year that was for a TV show theme song and they wanted Americana. It's like, all right, I have a resonator. I got some acoustic instruments. I got this. My uncle is a bluegrass musician. I pulled some of that stuff from him, sent it in. It's a little too twangy. All right, fix it, back and forth. I'm like, all right, that's enough. All right, 1564. I'm doing a Coldplay sounding thing and see what they do. Sent it to them. They're like, oh, this is perfect. I'm like, this is not Americana, man. Yeah. So it's like, I feel like sometimes you have to like tease out. Do these people know what Americana is? Do they know what I gotta get in their head? It's really an interesting back and forth.
Well, the thing with film and TV, especially TV, is like they're always about 5 years out of date. So I remember I used to act as well, and I remember doing a TV commercial. I didn't get this commercial. It was one I went for casting of, and we're talking about 97, 98. So in 97, 98, I had blonde, spiky hair, and everybody, in bands looked like that, and all the successful bands, like blonde, spiky hair, like low rising jeans, maybe with a belt and a, and a wallet chain and 70s shirt, you know what I mean? That was the look. And I got asked to go for this casting because they wanted somebody in a band, and I can't remember what it was for, but there's a scene when it's supposed to be like this kid who goes, like, oh yeah, whatever, like it's supposed to be like a trendy kid, a hip kid freaking out about something. So I go for the casting and I read for it, and I read for it like twice. So I thought maybe I was going to get it, and then I didn't get a call back on the second one. On the third one, sorry, after the second one for a third one. So it was 6 months later, the commercial comes on TV and the guy looks like Kurt Cobain. This is like 97. But that's the problem. See, Kurt Cobain was 93, 94 at the end. But nobody had like long, blonde, shoulder length hair and was wearing, no disrespect, a plaid shirt by 97, 98. You know what I mean? The current kids, like, so they wanted to be like, yeah, it's got to be a kid from now. It's like, no, you want a kid from 5 years ago. And that's what happens a lot, it's so that they're asking for something, but they're not that current. People ask me advice all the time. So I won't say which company it was, but I was working with this company, a film company, and I got invited out for a lunch meeting with the head of the head, sort of like, what was his job title? Anyway, whatever. The guy that I had to meet. The VP was somebody I got to have a relationship with, and now I'm going to meet the guy. And the guy picks me up, and he's got like an F-150 pickup truck. And this is a guy, 7-figure salaries. So I'm thinking he's driving an F-150 pickup. Okay. And he had gone to like music college. He had studied like clarinet, and he was a nice guy. I loved him. Really, really nice guy. But afterwards, after hanging out with him, I realized he's not really in touch with what's current, and they want to feel like they've discovered something new. So when you're pitching music, they like finding bands, like unknown bands, so they can be kind of like, oh yeah, I got this band, I found this band, I elevated this artist. They want to be cooler than they are, is what I'm trying to say. So when you're working with a music supervisor from film and TV, help them be cool, help them be current, help them be no, they'll like it because they'll think that they're onto something. Yeah. And they're verbal, they're very verbal. They'll send briefs, like really detailed briefs, when really you just want to know, oh, you want it to sound like Nirvana? That's what you want to be told. And they'll be like, well, now imagine it's like a summer's day. Right. And so it's about, it's about 4 p.m. We're in Hawaii. And, and it's like, you're reading all this going, what? But they're verbal, and they like to describe things. And so be part of that. When you're communicating with them, get in, tell them a little bit about it. I came out with this part because, I really like, I really like this idea, and it reminded me of this, and this. They'll respond to that. They will. They don't do this job to get sent music and go, yes, no. All right, I'm going home. They're in there because it's like any job. You want to enjoy it. You want to have some fun. You want to have some communication. You want to feel like this person is on your wavelengths and understands you. So, but if you start speaking their wavelength, it's actually quite fun.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Mick Gordon. Anybody watching this, go watch my Mick Gordon interview. Just type in Mick Gordon. Mick Gordon is the biggest games composer in the world. He did Halo. He did everything. And he's a metal shredder. And he programs everything in FL Studio, and then he shreds on it. But and the guy is a genius. And he talks. I think it was a 3-hour interview. He did it at 4 a.m. in Australia. And he talks about being in boardrooms, sitting like, there he is, like, rock and roll guy in a boardroom, having huge committee meetings.
That's great.
And he's like, it's a big part of my job is to listen to them and understand and get on their wavelength. Because it's not just necessarily about delivering the music, but making them understand that they've been heard. So when you deliver the music, it actually incorporates what they're talking about, and they can relate to you. Because that's a big part of the job. It's not just sending something that's great. Unfortunately, they might get 50 things that sound great. How are they going to tell the difference? Well, they like the guy that actually spent a few hours with them talking about understanding, bringing in their ideas, and they recognize it in the music.
Well,
we as musicians can get a little bit too full of ourselves. We can get a little bit too like, I know what's best. You don't understand. And what I always want to remind all of us is the only people that really matter are the public, because they buy your music. Yeah. So you can think, that this band's the best, or you're the greatest guitar player. I wanted to say before we forget, it's great that if there's some questions, I'd love to answer some from your viewers. But I want to say one band we didn't talk about is XTC.
Oh yeah, yeah. Okay, we can go there.
No. I'm just saying, like, Jellyfish, Supertramp, all this stuff. XTC, English Settlement and Black Sea. As far as I'm concerned, 2 of the greatest albums ever made. It's the reason why I have a pair of, AR-18s sitting on the consoles, because these are the speakers that Hugh used. Man. And so when I listen to like Melt that he and Steve did, Steve Lillywhite did, I'm listening with an SSL 4000 and those speakers, knowing that that's how the record sounded to them. Yeah. Because they mixed it and recorded it on that console with those speakers. And it gives me, because, I was just talking to Baloo about this. Of course we love that. We love that stuff. Of course we buy pieces of equipment because the people we admire. There's nothing wrong with that, because you need to be inspired.
Dude, Say no more. I mean, that's
I take
why that's why I play a Strat, 100%. Like there's no reason. I always say that to my friends and stuff who are learning guitars, like, don't be ashamed of that stuff. Like, don't be ashamed that you want to buy a pedal that your hero uses, because if it's going to get you to play the instrument and become a better musician
yeah,
because you're picking it up more,
yeah,
amen.
yeah. I mean,
Amen.
I walk the line because, of course, I also champion like Yamaha as a company because they make affordable guitars that are, I mean, Yamaha, I think, are one of the only kind of like full range
Mm-hmm.
manufacturers that makes everything in their own factories. So they entirely own everything. So even if it's made in Indonesia, as opposed to being made in Japan, there's no loss in quality. You can easily go and buy a $300 Yamaha acoustic or electric guitar, and the quality's exceptional. They don't have a third party person that has to make a profit out of what they do. They can absorb all those costs, so their profit's just on the finished product, and that makes them really great value for money. And I champion that. Now, don't get me wrong, I still love the things I love, whether it be a boutique guitar like this or that beautiful 62 over there, 335. I still they have all the value in the world, but I do champion the affordable great stuff because it's our job, you and I, Mark, to turn people onto music and
Mm-hmm.
encourage them to play. And if they've only got $300 to spend, then I'm going to push them towards something because, yeah, we want them to aspire to be the person that buys the boutique guitar or the beautiful, vintage guitar. Yeah, I want them all to
Well,
be successful enough to be able to afford those things.
yeah, and I feel like, I mean, you've inspired me. I mean, I'm a half in and half out. I don't do a lot of production. I do my demos for my band when I'm writing new stuff to send it to them so I can hear what we're doing. In fact, we're going to Nashville next week to work on a new record and
Where are
everything.
you
But
recording?
this place called The Studio. So, do you know about the Wood Brothers? You know
I
Chris
don't. Tell
Wood?
me.
So Chris Wood was the upright player from Medeski, Martin and Wood. You know that
Right.
that. So Chris and his brother Oliver have a band, and they've been doing it. I saw them open up for Bruce Hornsby when I was at Berkeley in 2008. That was the first time I saw them. And if you haven't heard any of the Wood Brothers albums, check them out. They're amazing. But the drummer, this guy John O'Ricks, he is out of control talented. So he plays drums and keys at the same time. I know he's not the first guy to do that, but to watch what he does with that band, and he's producing what we're working on. So we're going down to work in the Wood Brothers studio. They own that studio.
Wonderful.
Yeah, it's going to be amazing. But you have inspired me to kind of want to up my game in terms of, like, I bought an Apollo X4 because I had a Claret Focusrite that it was fine. It was working great, but I'm like, I know that I can achieve better quality for my YouTube demos, even for when I'm demoing pedals or whatever. I need something that's going to beef things up. I want to be able to understand how I'm capturing these sounds. So, like, having the resource of you in this world and giving the brilliant knowledge that you have and the experience that you have just out there on YouTube is like a huge resource. Like, we didn't have this stuff when we were kids. Like, we didn't have YouTube. Like, we couldn't go, oh, what's this pedal sound like? Or what's this guitar sound like? That
I mean,
didn't
it's the sole,
exist.
sole reason why I do it. Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, like, you
Mhm.
really have done a lot for me personally.
Thank you ever so much. That means a lot.
Yeah, man. But so anyway, but we do have a couple questions here. I want to get to those real quick before we do our lightning round. So Shane's asking, is there such thing as missing the boat? Getting started and have
No,
a Ford from it? No.
no,
Okay.
no, not at all. I mean, some of my favorite ever artists, and I mean in all ways, shape, or form. I'm talking about art, sculpture, whatever, started later in life. Some
Mhm.
people didn't start till they were super old. So
Right.
don't let age be an issue.
Yeah, didn't Stan Lee start doing Marvel in his 40s, I think? Wasn't that like
Probably,
I think Stan Lee
probably.
started pretty late.
I think most, we used to say millionaires, but obviously now the word is billionaires. But the average, I'm not talking about the two or three, the Musks or the or whatever. But most people, they tend to get a little. Age is an advantage. It's not a disadvantage. The only
Yeah.
the only advantage of being 18 in the music business is for teeny bopper young audience. Yeah. And to be honest, an 18-year-old girl is probably going to look at it and say, "I wish I was 13 on a Disney show." There's always
Right.
something that's going to hold you back. You're always going to pretend there's a reason. I had a conversation with my wife about this morning because, she wants to go back and finish a marketing degree. She's already a photographer. She's already accomplished in many things. But to her, she's like, well, now I've hit the big 4-0, like your friend just saying there, it's probably not worth doing. I'm like, honey, it's plenty of time. So,
Yeah.
we all have those self-doubts, but all we do is we apply a reason. When I was 19, I was too old. When I was 30, I got a fifth deal and I was too old.
Yeah. Yeah. That's amazing advice. And then my buddy Mario is asking, how do you feel about the current changes in the music industry, analog versus digital, especially when it comes to recording and producing?
Is that two separate questions? Like, what current changes do you think they mean?
I think he's talking more about like in the age of gear that we were talking about, even like
Right.
how does it work, in terms of what are your thoughts on analog gear versus digital gear, like modeling, whatever it may be.
It's combination of the both. The Townsend mic, which UA just bought. I didn't realize. I found out a couple of weeks ago that UA bought Townsend. So we went to Blackbird. We were there 2 weeks ago with Mark Martel. Mark Martel from Queen Extravaganza. The incredible singer. And we shot out the 47, the one that Massenberg says is the ultimate one. We shot out the 251. We shot out C12. C12A, because we thought if C12A works for Freddie, it would work for Mark. And you name it, SM7, because Mark actually uses an SM7. We ended up with the Townsend.
Man,
The Townsend was as close to my chain, and what ended up becoming my 47 chain became the chain to beat. Mark came in here, he sang in here, and he was like, your chain's incredible. And it's a U47 going through a BAE 1028, which is basically a 1073 with different EQ points, which doesn't matter because I don't apply EQ when I record on vocals. So it's a 1073. I go through a 160 VU, it's a 165 variable attack and release. I put on the auto button and use it as a 160. Anyway, 160 into an 1176, and that's my vocal setup. I stole that from Dave Jordan and Mike Klink. That's the sound of Guns N' Roses, User Illusion 1 and 2, the first album. That's the sound of vocals for everything Dave Jordan did, which is Alice in Chains, Jane's Addiction, the Stones' Dirty Work, Remaining Like, Talking Heads, that's all. So that chain is pretty bulletproof. And Mark's like, it's amazing. Got him a Townsend to try. He sent back the results from Nashville using a similar chain. And it's different, but just as amazing.
What's the street price on that mic these days? Like,
I don't know how much Townsend is, 1,400, something like that.
Maybe that's not bad.
I mean, compared with starting price for 40, most 47 is probably 18,000 now.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, that's not bad at all. If you want,
huh?
Yeah. Man,
yeah,
that's dope.
Yeah,
man,
yeah. So yeah, $30,000.
That's crazy. And then one more, Born, some injuries have kept me from gigging, but your videos really helped me get into recording drums and stay involved with music while I heal up. So just a little love there for you.
Thanks ever so much, Mike. Sorry to hear about your injuries. I hope you feel better soon. But yeah, I appreciate it. I started a channel because the way I came up in music is the way that everybody has to come up now.
Right.
I came up, without going to music school, and without, working in studios. Everything here I built up from just, 4-track cassette to ADATs to Pro Tools to here.
That's amazing. I mean, let's do one more and then we'll do the lightning round. Do you see Adam's music taking off, knowing that it works from headphones to multi-speaker setups, even with the backing of big companies like Apple? I'm not familiar with this. So you have to educate me.
I think it already has, Edgar. I think it's already taken off. I think Atmos is here to stay. I've done about 5 or 6 videos on it specifically because I'm trying to encourage people to get into it because there's so much work out there. Labels are going back through their catalogs like crazy at the moment, remixing stuff. My friend Brad Wood, was a relatively busy producer, working here and there on different projects, staying busy enough. Now he doesn't know what to do. He has no time. He can't sleep. He's remixing so many records in Atmos. Everybody I know that's got Atmos rooms is just overwhelmed with work. Man. I'm going in tomorrow to mix an album with Steve Jenowick. It's a Carole King record. Yeah.
Man.
Absolutely amazing.
All right. I got to check that out. All right, Warren, you ready to do some lightning round get down with me? Let's do this. All right. So we have a cruising altitude of let's do 110 BPM. How about that? We'll do that. Some suspense from a metronome here. Little humor. So this thing, Warren. So I'm gonna give you 10 questions, right? You can explain your answers if you'd like. I'd love hearing those. But if you don't want to, if you want to burn through them, burn through them. First question. It's always the same. Lennon or McCartney?
Oh, really?
Yes, sir.
Growing up as a child, Lennon, because I was a little kid when he died, so it's never going to get more powerful than that. I was super young when he died, and it's just just stamped on my head. So Lennon.
Okay.
But as you got older, it's a balance now between the two. But gut answer is Lennon.
Okay. Hard or soft pretzels?
I don't like pretzels.
Really? Okay.
Don't like
All right,
pretzels. Grew up in England. Do you like pretzels? No. We have an Indian. Do you like pretzels? We have a Mexican, an Indian, and an Englishman, and none of us like pretzels.
All right. So we kind of answered this question earlier, but digital mic modeling, yes or not yet?
Yes. Yes, definitely.
Okay. All right. 1994. Vitalogy or Super Unknown?
Oh, Super Unknown. Sorry. I know you're a Pearl Jam fan, but Super Unknown. Sorry.
Superman or Batman?
Oh, Superman. Because again, Superman movies of the 80s are my childhood.
Right. Are you a big John Williams fan? Big score fan? Like
I am. I like the scoring of that. But I also grew up on Elgar and Holst, which a lot of those, the Holst, the planets is a lot of John Williams repertoire. So,
right.
I love John Williams, but I grew up on classical music. So, yeah.
Yeah. So that's a no-brainer. Okay. Chad Smith or Will Ferrell?
Chad Smith or Will Ferrell? Oh, Chad. I did pre-production on Californication. It was a lot of fun, and being in a room, I didn't say a word to anybody. I just ran DAT tapes and recording while they were working on that. Their work ethic is second to none. They would come in 5 days a week for 6 months doing pre-production. John just got back in the band. They worked really hard. Rick worked really hard as well to go against all the naysayers. He wouldn't come in every day, but he'd give them topics to work on, come in for a few hours, listen to all the songs down. They deserved that massive album, Californication, that rejuvenated their career. Yeah. They worked super hard on that.
It sounds like this new record that's coming out is about to blow the world up as well.
From what I mean, reading. When I read anything negative about them, I'm always just like, oh, what?
Yeah.
With bands like the Stones, I know the Stones are back being hip, but for a while they weren't hip. The Chili Peppers have probably come back to being hip, and it deserves. With bands like that just have a freaking freight train of a career and they're just doing it. Yeah. You got to look past that stuff. Oh, Radiohead, sure. All those kinds of bands. Just listen to the records and shut the F up. These people they walk the walk, they talk the talk. Amen. I've been in the room with them. They care.
Man, amen. Yeah. Huart or Marshall?
Oh, hipster Huart, reality Marshall.
Okay.
I mean, I've got 3 Marshalls. But if you were to say favorite amp of that period, I'd say Laney, definitely.
Okay. Yeah, I feel like I've heard you talk about this.
Black Sabbath's first record is my favorite, probably one of my favorite guitar sounds for rock. And that's Tony Iommi pretty much invented the genres that we all love.
Yeah.
And all the grunge guys that I know all told me they weren't trying to invent new music. They were just trying to be Black Sabbath in like 1969, 70. That's what was going on. Yeah. They just wanted the early Sabbath. That's what grunge was to them.
Dude, fair enough.
Don't blame them.
Yeah, no, me either.
Yeah.
335 or Telly?
335 or Telly. Do you know me?
I mean, I watch
my 2 favorite guitars are a 335 and a Telecaster. I mean, this is obviously Baxendale's one, but to choose between the 2, I don't know if am I allowed to play the 5th on that one?
You got to choose.
I got to choose
one of those 2. They're both a Swiss Army knife, right?
He's asking me to choose between a 335 and a Telecaster. Yeah, that's so different, and they're both amazing. Yeah. When I was a kid, I wanted Andy Summers' guitar, and I keep looking at the reissues they made, which I've heard from Gray's guitars. Tom Gray are amazing. That Fender did a great job, and he would know because his dad's dearly departed, but his dad was Nigel Gray, who produced Alanis Noir, Regatta de Blanc, and Zenyatta Mondata. That was always the guitar I wanted as a kid, apart from obviously Brian's guitar. But I had the 335, and it was my dream guitar for years.
Yeah, that's a beautiful instrument, and you just played a killing one.
And you're really making it hard. I'll
I'm
go with the
sorry.
335 because, you know, in my heart of hearts, I still think blues guitar players make us all look silly. So I'm going to go with the 335.
All right, belly button or spilt milk?
I'm a belly button guy because I got into them on the first record. It doesn't mean that Spilt Milk isn't a masterpiece. Of course it is, but you know that Belly Button was the album that I fell in love with when it first came out. With they're both equally as good, but in my heart of hearts, Belly Button was like wow moment. You know, for me.
Yeah, I've been trying to get Roger on here because I want to talk a lot about the stuff he did with Beck, and then Blue Macaulay. Do you know Blue? He's in
I don't
LA.
personally know. No.
So he did. You should look into him. I think you would like his stuff too.
No, he is. I just don't know.
Power pop. All right, and this is the last one.
Last question.
Sometimes this is the hardest. Sometimes this is the easiest. This will probably be easier than the Tele 335 thing. If you could take one album, it does not have to be your favorite album of all time, but if you could take one record and erase it from your memory, so like you've never heard it before, just so you could go back and listen to it for the first time and experience it for the first time again, what album would that be?
See, I can't do that. My favorite album ever, my favorite albums ever, are all through my father. Number one, Night at the Opera is my favorite album. I would not want to erase that because then I would lose all the memories of listening to it as a child. So I can't do that. And then the other one with him, we had an 8-track cassette in the car, was all over the studio. There's 2 copies of it there. The vinyl's here somewhere, the CD's somewhere. Is Songs in the Key of Life, which I still believe is.
Oh man,
Elton John said it was the greatest album ever made. And you know, it might be the greatest album ever made. It's definitely my number 2 favorite after Night at the Opera. But you're asking me to erase one so I could hear it for the first time again.
Yeah,
that's the problem. I wouldn't want to erase those memories of being a child.
right. What if you could keep those memories of listening to it as a child, but just so you could hear the music like you were hearing it for the first time again?
Either of those 2.
Okay.
Either of those 2. Either
Okay.
Night at the Opera or Songs in the Key of Life.
All right, fair enough.
I have a lot of favorite records, but those 2 always come up depending on, doesn't matter what day it is or what I'm feeling or whether I'm listening to folk music or metal or jazz or funk or classical. Those 2 always come back.
Yeah.
And of course, Holst the Planets.
Yeah.
Holst the Planets was a big record in the UK. Any Gen Xer will know what I mean. It was pervasive.
Yeah, man. Did you? So for bebop stuff, just really quick, like, what is your favorite like bebop record, like guitar centric?
Well, it's difficult because you're asking about a period where, you know, because Charlie Christian's one of my early loves. Obviously, I just did a video on it. Django Reinhardt's another one of my early loves because those are records my father would play. So I got into like bebop sort of after that, after discovering those players. So lots of guys, when they get into jazz now, start with bebop. So I don't know. I don't think about it in the same terms. I think about all those records as one. So I don't know. I don't know. Don't want to pick a favorite in that period because for me, it's like Stefan Grappelli and Django Reinhardt and Charlie Christian are just like ingrained in my blood. And then for me, the next biggest one was definitely Joe Pass because I got Virtuoso when I was 11. I went and I'd read about Joe Pass and I hadn't heard him. And I went and bought the album Virtuoso and just brought tears to my eyes. I didn't even know you could play guitar like that.
Yeah.
And then I go back and I listen to Kenny Burrell and I listen to all of great Tao Farlow and everybody, you know, with, you know, Grant Green. I went back and discovered all those guys afterwards.
Yeah.
So it's hard to say because as much as I love bebop, that wasn't my entry. My entry was Charlie Christian and Django Reinhardt.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think most jazz guys enter with Tao Farlow, Eddie Grant, or you know, they come in Grant Green. Sorry, I just took Eddie Lang and Grant Green and made them one person. So anyway, yeah. So I don't know if I have a one that stands out more than anything else because I don't think that's. I want to come back to you on that one.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I had I think my first exposure to bebop was the record 7 Come 11, which is the Joe Pass Herb Ellis record. And I had the same experience, man. I was like, I did not know that you could play guitar like this. This sounds like these people are superhuman. Like, what is going on right now?
My
And
dad used to play all the time. We'd play Ella Fitzgerald and Joe Pass in the house.
Mm,
Still, I think the best music ever made. I mean,
yeah.
it brings tears to your eyes with Joe, just like with his little chord clusters, just holding down the song. And Ella is just like, I mean, my hairs are standing on end thinking about it. The fact
Yeah.
that anybody could do that.
Yeah.
One, a Gibson 175 and Ella Fitzgerald, just Joe Pass, Ella Fitzgerald. If anybody's watching this and has never heard that music, go and listen to it now.
Yes.
And it will bring tears to your eyes to realize what you can really do as a guitar player.
Man.
I should probably get on.
Yeah, thanks.
Val has been very patient here waiting. So
yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank
Warren.
you, Mark. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, man. Everybody go check out Produce Like a Pro. And like you have
Thank
a
you.
very, very strong Instagram presence as well. So everybody follow on all platforms.
Thank you very much.
All right, guys. We'll see you next time. Take care of yourself. Take care of each other. Take care.